That's some, all right. So that is something that the fact that it's shared means most people agree on it. Most people kind of decide that what is acceptable is something that we all, agree on. And also the idea of transgenerational means different generations also agree on that. So it's not like because you're younger or you're older, you have different ways, but and also it's symbolic, human capacity to use one thing to represent another. So we have, like in the US, you always hear about the American dream. That's kind of a symbol of what, this idea that if you work hard, you can do, whatever you want. And that's kind of some sort of symbolism in it. And also finally, it's adaptive. We have cultures because it helped us in the past to adapt to situations, to conditions, to be able to kind of do what we want to do. And the other question is, why waste energy to understand culture? I think it's critical for us to go beyond stereotypes. Stereotypes tend to be viewed negatively because we kind of make these assumptions, because somebody's from a culture, therefore they have to behave some way. We don't want to do that. We want to go more than that. And so it's very important to understand the ways of doing things. And if you think about it too, if you think about how the world is becoming more global today, maybe you work in a company and then maybe you're told that you need to go to the US to manage a plant or to run some operations, like let's say in Kentucky or something, or maybe you're posted in France. So you really have to also be open-minded about trying to understand what people are doing and these types of things. So that is why it is important for us to understand national culture. So as I was saying, and just again, a little bit of history of the Hofstede national culture. So just to repeat that he was a psychologist based in the Netherlands. And so he had access to, I think it was about, 60,000 employees of IBM employees around the world. So if you think about it, if you're trying to understand how people are different, if you compare people who have the same kind of occupation, the same job, then you're comparing people at kind of the same level. And so that data set was really useful in terms of being able to understand what types of situations these different people were facing. And so Hofstede came up with 5 different kind of cultural dimensions. And today I will focus mostly on the first 4, which is power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, collectivism, and masculinity. So the first one is power distance. So basically, this is kind of expectations about how equal people should be. So if you have high power distance countries, then you probably have heard like, these situations where people accept that inequality exists in society, they live with it, and also that people who are like the elites are entitled to privileges. So that means it is acceptable to kind of do what they want. And if you look at examples of high power distance countries, you see countries like Latin America, Latin European countries, and Asian countries tend to be very high. So what I will do here is I just want to show you the numbers. Hopefully you can see the number kind of well. But if you look at it, this is power distance, PDI. So a country that has low power distance. So basically the scores rank from 0 to 100. And so countries that have high power distance like China, India, Mexico, and so on. So these countries have what you would call high power distance. And then countries that have low power distance are countries like Germany, England, the US is fairly low as well. And then South Korea, as you can see, 16, kind of a little bit in the middle. But that kind of gives you an idea of the extent of how much power distance is accepted in a society. So going back to power distance, so let's say you're negotiating and you're negotiating like in China. You don't want to send somebody who's not very senior to do the negotiations. You want to send somebody who has the ability to make decisions. Why? Because age and seniority is seen as signs of wisdom. It's high power distance. People value seniority. People kind of see that as something that's extremely useful, and also in other places you also want to be respecting the titles and so on. So typically I used to go to teach like in Germany, for example, and people would address me by professor so and so. Korea tends to be very similar. But in the US, people will address me by my first name sometimes. People call me Praveen. And why? And that again represents this idea of power distance, because the US has fairly low power distance. So you don't really expect that because somebody's at a higher level, you should be more respectful of them. And also in high power distance societies, you want to be dressed much more formally. So this is power distance. And the second one that we see